Now for the top story tonight. Let's bring in ABC News correspondent Jonathan Karl, who is investigating the story. First of all, about Jay Carney today, I'm going to play a clip in a minute about your Q&A with him. Was his demeanor any different than it has been on a regular basis?
You know, not really, Bill. He is a happy warrior. He is a loyalist. He defends the president and all this administration's policies consistently every day. And he was under fire today. I mean, these are the toughest questions I've seen him face, maybe ever as White House press secretary. But generally, he seemed to be playing the role of, of Obama's defender.
When I was watching the press conference, he seemed to ramble and bloviate, using up as much time as possible in answers that weren't getting us anywhere. And I'm not saying that as a criticism. That's a strategy. I was wondering whether you noticed that or not.
Well, certainly there were some long answers, and I got into a little bit of a back and forth with him where I was trying to interrupt a little bit just so I could get some questions in and get some follow-up.
Let's show the viewers that. Roll the tape.
You said that the only changes that were made by either the White House or the State Department were stylistic and a single word. What we see here is that the State Department raised objections about the references to Ansar al-Sharia. They raised objections to the fact that the CIA had warned about terror threats in Benghazi prior to the attack. Those subjects were taken out of the CIA talking points at the direction of the White House based on
first of all, they weren't in the direction of the White House.
State Department.
This process, as everybody's an equal player in this process, says everybody's concerns have to be listened to and taken into account.
All right, so you didn't get anything. You got no admission, you and the other White House correspondents, of any wrongdoing at all. So they're basically saying, look, what we did was responsible, methodical, we took it easy. What is the big deal? It's the Republicans who are driving this. And your response to that would be?
Well, look, there's a clear problem here because what we heard from the White House in November was that neither the White House nor the State Department made anything beyond stylistic changes. They said there was a single word change. And what we've now seen clearly is that there were dramatic changes to these talking points and that they were done after the State Department had raised objections and the White House instructed that those objections be taken into account.
But they're not going to cede that. Carney's not ceding that. He isn't saying, hey, Mr. Karl, you're right. We misspoke back then. We did make a lot of revisions. He's not going to give you that.
No, and what Jay's point is, it's a narrow point, which is throughout the process, effectively the CIA held the pen. So the CIA was the one implementing these changes, but what we've seen is those changes were done after the State Department raised these objections and wanted this stuff removed. Bill, there is another important point, though, that Carney made kind of lost in all of this, which is all of these versions, including the very first one written by the CIA entirely, made reference to spontaneous protests being the inspiration for what happened in Benghazi, for Cairo being the inspiration. That is obviously wrong. But that was the CIA that made that mistake.
They backed off it pretty quick, I understand. The CIA backed off that very, very fast. And Rice didn't. I mean, they went out with that. The initial CIA put it in, but then the CIA backed off it, I think. Well, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, the CIA did sign off at the end on those talking points that were given to Susan Rice.
Petraeus signed off on that?
Well, that's an interesting point. I've also obtained an email from Petraeus, who, of course, was still the CIA director at the time.
Yeah.
And he was concerned that the things had been edited down to the point of uselessness.
I don't think Petraeus signed off on that, with all due respect, Mr. Karl. I don't think he signed off on it.
I have a direct quote from Petraeus' email sent on February 15th. This is the day before Susan Rice went on the shows. He said, I would just as soon not use them. He didn't like these talking points.
That's right. And that was September. You said February. That was September 15th.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right.
Yes.
So let's be clear. David Petraeus, the head of the CIA, didn't sign off on this at all. It was the White House and the State Department working together, all right, who made these edits and misled the world into thinking it could have been an anti-Islamic video put out by some nut in the USA. But here's the bottom line. We need to find out who in the White House drove this, whether it was the president or somebody else trying to protect him in a re-election campaign. That's the main story, is it not?
Well, I mean, that's certainly a question to be asked here. I think that from the email trail, it's clear that the objections that we see being raised were being raised by the State Department's spokesperson, effectively, Hillary Clinton's spokesperson.
Sure.
And these were the objections that were being made. And what the White House said, in the person of the Deputy National Security Advisor, was that everybody's concerns must be incorporated into writing this final version.
All right.
And
but
then
there
you
was
have
a big
version
political
that
component to
said
this because there was a presidential campaign underway. So I think that all of us, Mr. Karl, you, me, and every responsible, honest journalist in the country have got to find out who in the White House actually put pen to paper. And we know that the State Department didn't want to be embarrassed. We know that. That's a fact. But it goes over to the White House. Now we have to find out who did it and why. I got to run, Mr. Karl. Go ahead. Last word. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to say that we know that the actual pen to paper was Mike Morell. He was the deputy CIA director. He was the one who finally signed off on this. Petraeus did not object beyond this one email saying that these talking points were essentially useless.
All right.